Guinean President Alpha Conde is seeking a third term in an election on Sunday after a constitutional change allowed him to run again, but also sparked months of deadly protests in the country.
Polls opened in Guinea on Sunday with incumbent President Alpha Conde hoping to extend his decade in power. That third term has been made possible by a new constitution that prompted months of protests in which, according to Amnesty International, at least 50 people have died. Violence has also erupted during campaigning in recent weeks.
Donnez votre voix, mais ne donnez pas votre vie.
But at a polling station in the capital, Conakry, voter Amape said what unites Guineans is stronger than what divides them, and he hopes they will give their votes, not their lives. However, the United Nations has warned of divisive appeals to ethnic affiliations on the campaign trail. Conde and his main rival, Conde and Diallo, both draw much of their support from their respective ethnic communities. Diallo, a former Prime Minister who was runner-up to Conde in 2010 and 2015, has warned of fraud in the election and says he will challenge any irregularities. Many political analysts expect Conde to prevail after he won overwhelming approval for the constitutional change, though that vote was boycotted by the opposition. Conde says the reform was constitutional and democratic and argues that he needs another term to finish major mining and infrastructure projects. Under his stewardship, Guinea has made progress in developing its mineral riches, including bauxite and iron ore, and GDP has doubled over the past 10 years. But many Guineans complain that the mining boom has not ended frequent power cuts or unemployment.
For more on this story, we are now joined via Skype by African Affairs Analyst Nixon Katembo. Nixon, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to The Globe.
Good evening, Cindy, and thanks for having me once again.
Now, 10 years ago, President Alpha Conde, was celebrated as the first president since the country's independence back in 1958 to come through the presidency through free elections. But then 10 years later, his popularity seems to have plummeted. What could have been the problem?
I think the problem could have been the nature of politics in the country, mostly the youthful population growing with so much unemployment, despite the economic gain that he has actually championed, especially in the mining sector and the other sectors of the economy. Also, one look at the security cluster, where he has tried to change the issues of defense reform and so on. And I think that's where things went wrong, especially if the economic gains that he has done and the reforms benefited the few. And that's where lies the challenge, because a lot of youth in that country are yearning for jobs, they are yearning for better educations, then they are yearning for employment to better themselves.
You were just taking us through what the Constitution advances in terms of the presidential term limits, because there's various competing schools of thought in Guinea, where on the one hand, critics say that the draft constitution extends the presidential term limits, to 6 years and essentially removes the two-term limits. And on the other hand, some proponents of this and other critics say that the presidents are limited to only 2 terms in office. So what does the Constitution provide in this regard?
In this regard, to be quite frank, the Constitution of Guinea provides for 2-term limit, of which 5 years. However, the clause in which extend the 6-year term limit was the one actually that led to the referendum, because the government in power felt that maybe they have not done enough in terms of what they were planning for their mandate. But unfortunately, this brought about much contestation within the political class in Guinea, leading to the opposition boycotting that referendum. And the 6-year term actually is an extension that emanates from the referendum that were brought about by Conde, to try to maneuver the constitution and remain in power. And clearly, there have been some boycotts, and the protests are indicative of those contestations and actually those rejections of the current political class in Guinea, especially led by Conde.
And what is the possibility of holding elections on free and fair terms when the electoral register, as it were, is very difficult to trust?
Well, those has been the contestations that are coming from the opposition. The opposition is saying that the Electoral Commission itself is not fair, it's biased towards the president. So it's really difficult at this point in time to point that the elections will be free and fair, especially if you look at the trajectory of the past 1 year leading up to these elections. So one would say that it's too early to tell whether these elections will be free and fair. Of course, given the turnout of the elections today, it will determine who actually wins the elections. But of course, those political contestations have shown that really the people are no longer interested or trust the current government. And this is not isolated to Guinea itself. We saw it happening elsewhere on the continent. The case in point is the Democratic Republic of Congo, where now today we learn that those who were said to have won the elections were not actually the one who won the elections. So it's really a problem on our continent where incumbents have always used their power of incumbency to circumvent the electoral processes and making sure that they remain in power. And Guinea is following this through the same path.
I mean, the African Union has already cancelled a delegation or an observer mission to Guinea, citing, controversies in the way that the elections are handled. And the European Union, on the other hand, is saying that, it is casting serious doubt in the polls' credibility. And now the big question then, Nixon, is where in the world is this contentious 2.5 million voters come from? And the increase in the names in that particular electoral roll, happens in the region where Alpha Conde has a major support. So the fact that the credibility of the election has been cast in doubt, will it really matter for President Alpha Conde?
The credibility of the elections, I think, is a very important and a key factor in, allowing the elections to be said to be free and fair. And if you talk about the added extra 2.5 million voters in areas where Alpha Conde is popular, this comes from the fact that these elections have taken even an ethnic aspect where Conde Diallo is from the Pearl community, which is much of the majority population in that country. So one would understand that in trying to match the popularity of the opposition leader